Good morning. My name is Matt Miller. This is my family. Kaylin, will you stand up? This is the woman that agreed to go with me across the ocean. I think she's happy about it. Thankful for her. My kids, will you guys stand up for me? All right. You have Milos in the back. We have Nikolai over here, Marco, and then we have Amelia over there as well. All right, so that's our crew. And I'm thankful that God has allowed us to go to Serbia. Thank you. And we've been over there for 4 years. And God's done a lot of great, crazy things in our lives. In those 4 years, God's allowed us to establish an NGO, a non-government organization, that we can print Bibles in Serbia. And then also He's allowed us to start the Independent Baptist Church over there, known as Balkan Baptist Church. We just finished those paperwork about a few months before we came here. And then also we have a Bible project that we finished, and those Bibles are going out as we speak. And through all that, God has allowed us to be meeting together with about 30 to 50 people on a weekly basis, which is a pretty wonderful thing for European context. If you don't know where Serbia is, if you go to Italy, you cross that little body of water, you'll go to Croatia. I don't know if anybody knows where Croatia is, but right next to Croatia is a country called Serbia. If you've gone to Romania, you've gone too far. So you need to back up, okay? So we're right there. Serbia is not to be confused with Siberia. Serbia is north of Russia, and we are not that spiritual. Okay. Bad joke, okay. So not Siberia, it's Serbia. Serbia is south of Hungary, all right? So you hear of Hungary in the news a lot with different political situations, but that's where we are. Southeastern Europe, as far as the culture, lifestyle goes, are very much similar to the U.S. in many ways. We drive cars, we eat meat and potatoes, we struggle to find parking spots, and we complain about the prices, So it's very much similar in many ways. And so if you'd like to talk more about that or have questions, we'll be in the back table after service. However, I'd like to bring a message here today, and I do want to thank our friends, the Phoenix family. They came down 10-hour drive to spend some time with us from Vermont. And so I'm thankful for their fellowship the last few days, and they're here today with us. But today, I'm not going to be preaching on missions. So if you've come excited about hearing a message about missions, I'm going to disappoint you. What I am going to speak about is a message on a missionary. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is a missionary. The title is about chapters, just simple chapters. Does anybody in here like to read books? Okay, we got a couple. Good. I see some elderly folks. I see some young folks. That's good. My kids love to read books. I don't like to read books. Reading books is equivalent of going to the dentist. Okay, for me, it's a struggle. It's a big struggle. But I know I should probably do it. But I do remember there have been some books in my life where I just could not put it down. You ever been there? Where you're like in bed with a light on trying to finish that last chapter, and then guess what happens? Do you read what's going to happen on the next chapter? Do you start, or do you just quit? Right? For some of us, you just can't help it. And you start reading that next page, and then guess what happens? Now you're stuck again, right? You just can't put it down, For some people, that's how you live your life, You just read books like that. For me, it's just hard to get started. But there have been some books where I just could not stop reading. I remember walking around our parents' island kitchen, and I just have this book about Adoniram Judson, right? And he was just going and doing his missionary trail. And I just kept going. And it was the thickest book I've ever read. Right? Most of the books I read were 4 pages thick, and I felt accomplished when I got that done. But our life is very similar to a book. You could think about each year of your life as like a chapter. And for many of us, it's exciting to look to the next page. I remember when I was 15 years old and I was going to going to the chapter of driving a car. right? And I was like, I'm so pumped. Like, my life is going to be awesome, right? I'm going to get this Toyota pickup truck four-wheel drive, and I'm going to hang out with my buds, and we're going to go tear it up, son, okay? Now, I was born in North Ohio, Medina, Ohio. I was born. I was raised for the first part of my life in Burbank, Ohio. Our family was farmers, and we moved over to Missouri for cheap farmland, and that's where I spent the majority of my life growing up in North Missouri. So if I seem a little bit strange, it's because I'm mixed, all right? But I tell you what, there's some chapters in my life that were very exciting. Driving a car, you know. I was homeschooled for a lot of my time when I was growing up, and the first time I got thrown into public school was a miserable chapter. And I did not want to go to public school. I talk about the scariest thing in my life at that time was going to a public school after I'd been homeschooled. If you never experienced that, I don't put that upon you, you know. You know, but I look back, and maybe you've got some times in your life that you were very fearful of or you were very excited for. But I'll tell you what, I'll be honest with you today. I am fearful of the next chapters in my life. I'm comfortable where I'm at. And I'll be honest with you, in many ways, I want to go back. I want to go back to those good chapters. In many ways, I wish I could go back to those chapters and not open up the next chapters in my life. Many people say that your children is from 0 to 7 is the wife makes the biggest influence in their lives. From 7 to 14, dad, that's where you make the biggest influence in your children's life. And then from 14 to 90 is where the world makes the influence. Our children are getting to be 7. And I'm thinking about the next chapters and the pressure. I'm comfortable where I'm at. But I'm looking at the future. I'm thinking about the next chapters. I'm like, whew, I don't want to open those chapters. I don't want to turn those pages. Maybe some of you have, maybe the next chapters is your kids getting married. Maybe some of you it's retiring. Maybe the church here is going through a transition or a chapter change. And for many people, it's like, no, I'm happy. I'm not interested in turning the page to something new. I'm going to give you a couple stories here in the Bible. First story, you don't have to turn there. We're going to be in the book of Joshua, chapter 1 here. And as you turn there, I want to give you another story about a man named Samson. The Samson character grew up being ruled by people that were not his own. And those people were content, maybe not content, but they were maybe fearful of moving forward. And so when Samson comes out and he ties the foxes' tails together, right, and he makes them run through the fields and in a way to spite the Philistines, you know what? The people around him said, listen, guy, just calm down. We're okay in this chapter of our life. Don't make a mess. But Samson was like, no, we need to move to the next chapter. And unfortunately, from what I see, that, you know, the whole entire life of Samson was stuck in those chapters because most people were not willing to move forward. I think about, you fast forward to the New Testament. There's a group of religious people called the Jews who were content in the chapters of life that they were given. Now, we know that the law and the books and all the things that God has given us was for a time, but it wasn't complete. It was like a chapter in a series. But these religious people were very content being where they were. And because many of them refused to turn the page, what happened? They missed out on God's blessings. I'm fearful that's what happened with us. Some chapters we love, some chapters in our life we endure, and some chapters we don't want to leave, and we're afraid to enter into. When we go back to Serbia, we're going to have a lot of changes that we have to make. The building that we have, we're going to have to look for a new building. The different types of ministries that we're doing, we're going to probably have to change some things. The amount of time I spend in ministry versus the time I spent in our family, and spend with my wife, and it's all going to change around. And I'm not looking forward to change. Even when I got married, I'll be honest, many guys struggle with this. I love my wife, but I was afraid to get married. Why? It's not because I didn't love her, but it's because I was scared of change. I was scared of that new chapter. And I think that's where a lot of people are today, afraid of those new chapters in our lives. We had a situation here that happened a few weeks ago where we almost lost one of our children in a river. And if I could go back, I would never open that chapter. The things that happened in your life. When I was a young man, I was at a hunting accident, and one of my buddies, pulled the trigger on the gun, and the bullet went through my stomach and came out my back. And I was in the hospital for several months. I would not want to open that chapter. I would not want to go through that again. The things that you enjoy, to go back to my mom and dad's house. I've been gone for 4 years overseas, and I got to go back to my mom and dad's house. And I got to ride the trails with my dad. I got to go mushroom hunting, right? I got to go enjoy life as I had growing up. I got to be with my mom and my family. I'm telling you, I missed it. And in many ways, I wish I could go back. The future looks awful fearful to me. But you see what happened with Samson and the people around him. Let's just stay. See what happened with the Israelites, with the Jewish people there. They said, you know what? We're not going to change. We don't want to adopt these new things. We want to stay exactly where we are. Israel missed Christ because he did not fit their expectations. You see, it's possible to be so attached to what was or what we expected that we miss what God is doing right now. And the past can begin to look better than the future. But the main point I want to get here is really in the book of Joshua. You see here Joshua. Now we know what happened at the end of Deuteronomy. Moses, their great leader, had died. But you know what happened during his time is many people were in this wilderness of their life, weren't they? In the wilderness, and many people in that wilderness, maybe they got to be, hey, life's not too bad here. We can do this. We can handle this. But you know what happened? Many people said, let's go back where our good memories was. They said, hey, life's been rough enough. Let's go back to where it was instead of moving on. So here comes this young Joshua guy, right? Joshua chapter 1, this is where we find this story. And it says, now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. That chapter is over. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, and all that this people unto the land which I do give them, even to the children of Israel. Even every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon have I given unto you, as I said unto Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, even unto the great river, the river Euphrates, and all the land of the Hittites, unto the great sea toward the going down of the sun, shall be your coasts. There shall not any man be able to stand before thee in all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Be strong and of a good courage. For unto this people shall I divide for an inheritance in the land, which I swear unto their fathers to give them. Only be thou strong and very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. God was giving them instructions for the future. Not contentment to stay, but go to the future. And I'm telling you, in my life, that's one of the hardest things for me to do, is to move forward into a future that I don't know about. We often joke, our kids are never allowed to leave the house, never allowed to date, never allowed to, drive a car because there's danger and everything. And we were simply at the camping with our friends yesterday, and one of the kids tipped a chair over towards the fire. Man, how many dangers are there in the world? It's crazy, the amount of car crashes, the amount of things there are, and to be frozen in fear. The older we get in life, I think of many of you elder saints out there that say, hey, I like things the way they are. And so do I. But you know what makes me more fearful than the future? I'm more fearful of missing God's blessing and God's will. And the fear of missing out on God's will and God's blessing is what motivates me to continue to move forward. The Bible says here in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. I'm telling you, if it wasn't for verses like that, I'm telling you. Other verses that pop into my mind is when it comes to the book of John, where Jesus talks about the two different types of peace. You've heard that before. The two different types of peace. Did you ever hear that? If it wasn't for understanding that God has a type of peace that isn't the normal type of peace, he says this, he says, my peace I give unto you. Now hang on a second. When you understand the context of that, these disciples, they were in like the best years of their life. Like they had their Messiah. They had it all going on. They were seeing miracles. They were seeing all this stuff. I mean, if someone come up to them, like Jesus was going to protect them, take care of things, was well. But Jesus is saying, listen, I'm going to be gone, and you're going to have to step up and do this on your own. I think about a lot of pastors. We go to a lot of churches, and there's a lot of pastors that are very fearful of handing off and delegating, because what if something goes wrong? But just as much as there's young people who should be delegated to, who are fearful to step up because they're comfortable where they are. There's people who should be Sunday school teachers. There's people who should be bus drivers. There's people that should be involved in something, but they're fearful because they want to stay where the comfort zone is. But in doing that, you're missing out on the next chapters of your life where there could be the blessings of God, where God's will can be found, because we all want to stay right where we are. And I'm no different. But Jesus says, my peace I give to you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Which tells me there's two different types of peace. There's the world's peace that makes you go, I've got peace about that. Sometimes my wife, when little babies were growing up, she'd say, honey, the little one needs his diaper changed. And I'd sit there and I'd pray about it. Lord, just not feeling it. Right? And I have an emotion come over me. I don't have peace about that. Right? I mean, Ohio is beautiful. I forget how beautiful Ohio is. Okay? Maybe some of you don't think so, but I think it's beautiful, all right? And I'm driving up here today, and I pass by this golf course. I don't do a lot of golfing. I just like to be lazy sometimes, okay? And I see that golf course out there with the dew and the deer running across. I'm like, man, I could go to church today, or I could go golfing. I think I've got peace to go golfing. You see the difference? There's a peace that this world gives us. You think about teaching a Sunday school class. You think about doing a bus route. You think about doing something for the Lord, and you pray about it, but you start to get nervous. You start to get sweaty. And you think, man, this is not of the Lord. Maybe it's a missionary. You know, there's a need, so much need for missions. And it doesn't seem that God's calling people anymore. It just doesn't seem. It seems like back in the day, God was like, all right, you there, you go there, you there. But nowadays, it seems to me God's like, well, it was worth a shot. But you know what? That's not my God. He's still calling. But you know what it seems to happen? Is people are content in the chapters that they're reading. And they're fearful to turn the page. Maybe God is calling you to be a missionary. Or maybe God's calling you to be a help to a missionary. That's a whole new field itself. To go to a mission field and help some missionary. It's wild. Many pastors in the U.S., they have a head pastor and another pastor, and they have an assistant pastor. What about missionaries? Where's the assistant pastor? Where's the assistant helper? It's not because God's not calling. Maybe it's that we're afraid to turn the page. You see these people in the book of Joshua, chapter 1. They're in the desert. Now, as crazy as the desert is, you would think that people would not be comfortable there. But they had learned to make a life. Talk about making 40 years in the desert, if I'm not wrong. 40 years in the desert. Well, look at this. We've got a sand castle over here, right? And we got a moat, okay? We got all these cool things that we built out of rocks, you know. It's like a nice little home. Some people are like, you know what? Remember back in Egypt? We had it all. Like, we know what we had. We could go back. Like, we don't know what God's going to do in the future, but we could go back. That'd be great, wouldn't it? But God said, tell them to go over. Only be thou strong and very courageous. Think about those words. You know, it's very tempting to just call it quits. In Serbia, they don't really like what we're doing. They don't come up to us and say, well done. Matter of fact, it's quite the opposite. They call us all sorts of crazy names. And I'm a people pleaser. I like to make people happy. Before I was a missionary, I was a carpenter. I built things. I did drywall. I did electrical. I did plumbing. Right? I fixed people's problems and they were happy. But now my whole job is almost like making people angry. And I don't like it. But you know what? Because I read his book and I see his heart and he calls me to step forward and keep moving forward, it provokes me on. I think about, again, I go back to my kids and man, what's ministry going to look like in the future? What am I going to have to give up? I'm a very task-oriented person, and now to spend more time with the kids and less time in ministry and these things, because if you lose your family, what do you have? And it makes me afraid. I think about Christ. I think about where he talks about the two different types of pieces. I think about the book of Revelation, where he talks about the books were open. Now, many different philosophers or theologians talk, about two different books. Talk about the book of life and the book that would contain salvation. Your name must be written in the book of life. But it's almost like every one of us have a book that is written about our lives, what you did in this life, where you stopped reading, where you stopped trusting the Lord. And I'm fearful that many of us, me included, are getting to a place in our life where we take that book and we say, hey, I'm happy where this is, and you close the book instead of moving forward. Historically, Baptist pastors, sometimes they became Baptist pastors at 14 years old back in the old days. Crazy to think, right? Back when I was growing up, tractor drivers were 16 years old, working the fields. Now, many of us young folks, we don't step out to make a full commitment till we're 30, 40. Times have changed, but human nature has not. What's God calling us to do in our lives? The question is not, do I know what happens next? Because I have no idea. The question is, do I trust the one who does know? And that's where it all comes down to it. Do we trust him with our future? Your desert, my desert in Serbia, is not the destination. It's a transition. It's a transition. God is not asking you to write your future. He's asking you to walk with him into it. I can think about the book of Psalms, chapter 23, right? You could quote that psalm. The Lord is my, I shall not. He maketh me to lie down in, all right? Talks about restoring my soul. Leading me beside still waters. He restores my soul. My cup runneth over, right? It talks about this, how he leadeth me into the path of righteousness for his name's sake, but he also says that I go into the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Now hang on. Think about this. In modern Christian philosophy, why would God make you go into the valley of the shadow of death? That's not my God. My God wants the best for me. Why would God send me to a mission field where my family is going to maybe struggle, or my kids might not grow up with a Christian school? Why would God want that for me? But perhaps that's the next chapter for someone's life. Because you know what he says? He didn't say that he let me go under the valley. He didn't say let me go around the valley. He didn't say over the valley. He said through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. Why? Because he's with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. And here's another one. He says this, crazy enough, but he says, thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. You think about your enemy. You've got your enemies, and God says, here's a table. There's your enemies. I want you to sit there. Bro. That's not my God. My God wants to prepare a table before me in the presence of a buffet. Right? But to think about in the presence of our enemies. Now hang on, that's not God. Yes. The disciples, he prepares that table. He's going to have them go into a different transition. But guess what he said? I will not leave you comfortless. We have the comforter. Why would God ever give us a comforter if we were never uncomfortable? So the very fact that I'm in Serbia and I'm nervous and I'm sweating, I'm sitting in front of lawyers and I'm going to the police station and the people don't speak and I've got to try to speak Serbian to them. Zdravo, brate, kako ste vi? Dobro sam, a vi? That's hello, how are you? In Serbian. Kak ti la? That's Russian. 80% of our church in Serbia is Russian speaking because of this Ukraine-Russian war. They fled their homeland to look for a place. But as the book of Ruth, I believe it is, talks about, for such a time as this, that God has placed us in Serbia. And we have 80% of our church is Russian speaking. One of my wife's best friends now is a young Russian girl from Siberia, which is not Serbia. And she gets to speak Russian to these people. And these Russians are coming to our church. They come because of the Bible that we preach. They come because of the standards that we have. They come because of the music that we have. Old-fashioned, just God-glorifying music. They say, we like this. But God's got us there. And I'm learning part Russian. Ja učim malo srpski. So if you don't know much about the Serbian culture, they're a little bit gangster, right? So when I talk a little bit Serbian like this, I have to kind of do a little bit of like, little bit, when you come over to Serbia, worst thing you could do is smile. You need to have good face, strong eyebrows and, like this. And I'm in a taxi. I'm in a taxi going across town. The guy says, Udaklasi, or where are you from? I said, where do you think? I say, Stamishlish bre, what do you think? And he says, Belarus. And he says, ne. He says, Ukraine. I says, ne bre. Ja sam komšija od Russia. I am a neighbor of Russia. He says, I have no idea. I says, I am American. Alaska, Russia, right? We're neighbors. It counts. All right? So I'm sitting there, and he asked me a question. Zašto ovdje? Why are you here? I say, I hold up my business card. You can see my business card on the back table. It's a little small business card, and it's got a blue fish on it. And I say, ja spremam plave riby. I make bluefish. He says, what is that? I pull up my business card. It has no words on it. It's a wordless track. All right? I hand him, you can see it on the back table. Give him this wordless track, and I say, I make bluefish. He says, šta je to? I said, well, let me explain it to you. See, this bluefish is swimming this direction, and all these blackfish are swimming this direction, but they're schooled together. So this bluefish is going this direction. A bluefish is someone that's not afraid to think for themselves. That's not afraid to go away from what everybody else is doing. You understand 90-some% of the country is Orthodox, and they're close-knit. It's like trying to reach someone in an Amish community. It's the same concept. So I hand him my business card. He says, aye. For someone to stand on their own, to think for themselves, they say, bravo. To je dobre. That's good, he says. But šta radiš? What do you do? I say, well, I make bluefish. You see, this bluefish, it goes after something he cannot see. He cannot touch, taste, or smell. But he goes in that direction because he knows that's the right way. But see, the most fish here, the school of fish here, they're going after something smaller, something they can achieve, finances, or some kind of position in life. And they go for that, and that's their goal in their life. That's most people. But I help people go after something that you can't taste, touch, or smell, but they know it to be the right way. And they say, this is good. Bravo. Sharadish. What do you do? And I say, I teach the Bible. Here's my number. Let's get together and talk. He takes the wordless track. Sometimes I see them again in the same taxi. And he says, you remember me? I says, little malo, just a little. He says, you're the Baptist preacher. I says, da, tu sam. And we begin to make relationships and connections. And I get to travel around Serbia to talk about the Bible, not religion. You see, religion is like a cage. God so loved the birds that he gave them trees, a place for man to rest. But man so loved the birds, he gave them cages. And that's the difference between religion and Christ. If you feel trapped in your faith, that's a problem. That's a big problem. I've got some friends that try to do outreach to Amish, and there's people that are interested, but if they leave their faith, just like the Serbians, if they leave their faith, many times they leave everything. Their home, their land, their families. For many Amish, it's even their wife and children. If you leave the faith, you cannot take your wife and kids with you. In some cases. Think about the trap that religion can be. So one of the things we go to Serbia to do is to set people free. And if the Son shall make you free, you shall be free indeed. That's the God I serve. When I was shot, about the age of 16 years old, that was a moment in my life I had to question my purpose. I used to make lots of good money fixing people's problems, crawling under houses, fighting off giant spiders. You think it wasn't a big deal. It was a big deal. Yeah, you know it was. But I had to rethink my purpose. And I got into His Word. I began to read through there. I read the book of Romans. I read other parts of the Bible. It says, you're bought with a price. You do not belong to yourself. You are not your own. Therefore, glorify God in your body, in yourself. I began to think, are you telling me that God put me on this earth not for myself, but for Him? See, you put all this stuff together, and when I come up to the end of that chapter, and it's a scary chapter, I could close the book, or I could turn the page. You know what helps me turn the page? Is knowing that God is writing the story. And I can trust Him. Lord, I don't know what you have for us. I'm losing my hearing in my ear. I have health issues. I was in the heart hospital in Serbia for 2 weeks because of a pre-heart attack condition. I don't know what God's doing with my life, but you know what I can do? Is I can trust Him. If you surrender to do something in this church, but you're going to miss out on something that you enjoy, you are not your own. If God's pulling your heart to serve Him somewhere, full-time ministry, as a missionary, or just here in your local church, and your question is, and your answer is this, but what about this that I'm going to miss out on? Maybe it's time to rethink the way that you're reading your book. When me and my wife were first dating, I remember at the Bible college we were attending, we looked down at some flowers and we were talking about the insignificant parts of the flower that God has created. And I was doing the most nerdy thing that I could. And I was explaining to her a vapor. And I pulled out my inhaler. Is it myself an inhaler? I have asthma, okay? Probably not the most romantic thing I could have done, okay? But I pulled it out and I took that inhaler and I went, Ch-. And just for a couple seconds, you could see a white mist come out. It's about $10 worth of mist, but it came out. And you think about that. Life is but a vapor. It appeareth for a moment and then passes away. I want to challenge all of us here today. We all have books of our lives, and they've been written and are being written. But don't be fearful of the chapter that you're in. Don't be content with the place that God has put you, but be willing to step into the future that God is calling you to. I don't know what that looks. It looks different for everybody. And I'm trying to talk myself into this when I go back to Serbia, to be content or to try to take those next steps and say, Lord, guide, help me. Help me to be a better father. Help me to be a better husband. Help me to be a better friend, a better pastor, a better missionary. Lord, you're going to have to guide me. You're going to have to strengthen me. And just like these people in the book of Joshua, chapter number 1, who are very much content with living their life in that spot. But God was saying, I have something beautiful for you. I have a better plan for you. And I'm telling you, I'd love to see another 1,000 missionaries called this year to go serve around the world. I don't know who those are. I don't know what God's plan, but maybe it starts with a Sunday school teacher. Maybe it starts with a song leader. I'm telling you what, to stand up here and to song lead like that guy was doing, where's that whippersnapper at? I'm telling you, to stand up here, where's he at? Over here, there he is. Brother, it's nerve-wracking. It ain't no walk in the park, as they say. You know what I'm saying? Son. But to take that next step and say, Lord, I'm going to mess things up. Lord, I may not do things perfectly. I may not be the prettiest, the hairiest, whatever it is. Lord, I'm willing. Use me. And Joshua stood up. God used him to lead these people. And you remember the story that they went through? The Battle of Jericho? Talk about the walls falling down, crossing rivers. I mean, if they would have stopped reading that book, what would they be left with? But because they moved forward in their lives, God is writing a beautiful story. I was thinking, if you could think about if there was a library in God's throne room, just picture it. And you have all these like leather-bound, ancient-looking books. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I wanted to make an AI picture, but I didn't get around to it. But you have this big old glorious throne, and on the back you have these books. Now, the Bible says the books were opened. That could be 2, it could be 3, but it's plural. And you imagine these books being on his bookshelf. When we get to heaven, he walks you back there, and he says, let me show you this book. He tips that leather book off of there. He opens it up, and it's a story of your life. And how there was times in your life when you thought about quitting, giving up, or stopping. And you asked the Lord, did they stop? He said, no, watch this. And he turns the page, and the story continues. Because there's keeping track of there's a record book. I'm telling you. There's going to be, I hope, maybe there won't be, but there will be a book on God's shelf with the title, Matt Miller. And I hope it's a faithful one. I hope it's a consistent one. I hope he doesn't read halfway through and say, then he changed. And the rest of the story is sad, so we're not going to read it, but what about you? It could be a beautiful story if you're willing to take yourself, set it aside, and be used of him. God is good. Let's all stand. I'm going to turn it back over to Pastor here. The thing that is more fearful than the next chapter is missing God's blessings and his will. So I tell you this. I will go forward. What will you do? Thank you.